Nothing had more to do with the way Burlington developed than the various streams that were collectively known as Hawkeye Creek. Today, they are all but forgotten. Hawkeye Creek's many branches cut deep ravines that separated Burlington's neighborhoods: North Hill, Sunnyside, Mount Pleasant, Agency, West Hill, and South Hill. Downtown Burlington, once called Level Town because everywhere else was up in the hills, is located in the Hawkeye Creek Valley. We begin our tour of Hawkeye Creek at the base of Osborne Street Hill, near Brooks and Franklin Streets. But before we head downtown, let's look behind us and over to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad tracks. Here we see the base of the ravine and the tracks. The West Burlington Hill Ravine runs from the city of West Burlington toward the Mount Pleasant Streets Viaduct and lies between the Sunnyside Avenue neighborhood and the Mount Pleasant Street neighborhood, once called Dutchtown and later Lincolnville. This aerial view clearly shows the ravine and the railway. The spike to the right of center is the memorial for Charles Perkins in Aspen Grove Cemetery. Perkins was the president of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, now the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. He lived most of his life in Burlington. Looking behind us again, but this time to the other side, we see the Brook Street Ravine, or what is left of it. One of the branches of Hawkeye Creek flowed through much of North Hill all the way down to the Osborne Street area. It is filled in now with the exception of Brook Street. This view looks down Brook Street from Central Avenue to Osborne at the bottom. Now let's drive a little. Hawkeye Creek is to our right, alongside the railroad tracks. We have stopped just before the Mount Pleasant Street Viaduct. If we look to our right, we will see where Hawkeye Creek flows into a storm sewer. Hawkeye Creek flooded on May 13, 2010. The creek was full to near overflowing with rainwater for several days after the flood. Moving on. We are now near where Lucas Avenue meets Osborne. Lucas Avenue is to our right. A stream flowed from North 8th along the south side of Spring Street and emptied into Hawkeye Creek in this area. Most of the ravine is filled in today. This particular ravine entered a large natural amphitheater to our left. The Hodges brothers were hanged here in 1845 after their convictions for murder. Driving on. Here we are underneath the Highway 34 overpass. If we look behind us, we will see part of the Patterson Hollow industrial area. Patterson Hollow was named after John Patterson, an early Burlington settler. An early 1900s era postcard shows the same area. To our right, another branch of Hawkeye Creek formed the Freeway Ravine. The ravine runs from Central Avenue on this end to near Roosevelt Avenue on the other. Mount Pleasant Street neighborhood is on the north, and the Agency Street neighborhood, once called Hibernia and later Washington Heights, borders it on the south. This is a 1930s aerial view of the ravine many years before the freeway was built. Hawkeye Creek still runs through here, although its path has been altered by the freeway. Part of the creek empties into a storm sewer near Osborne Street and Lucas Avenue. Let's drive a little bit further. We are now at Osborne Street and Agency. Another major Hawkeye Creek ravine is Gunnison Gap. It is bordered by the Agency Street neighborhood on the north and the Sanderson Heights neighborhood on the south. Looking this way, we see the eastern end of the gap at the bottom of the Agency Street hill. The gap is over to the left, beyond these buildings. The far end of Gunnison Gap is next to the base of the Plain Street Hill. The stream is called Small Run in this area. One branch of Small Run began near West Avenue and another near Roosevelt. Hawkeye Creek still runs above ground through portions of Gunnison Gap. There was at one time a slaughterhouse in Gunnison Gap. They felt free to dump their garbage in the creek. In fact, for years Hawkeye Creek was an open sewer for industrial and human waste. This is an old postcard of where Gunnison Street crossed over Hawkeye Creek in the gap. Many years ago, this is what you would have seen if you looked toward downtown from inside the gap. The little arched bridge shown earlier is just right of center. The building in the upper right in the far background is Hibernia Hall, formerly St. Patrick's Catholic Church. The same view today. Hawkeye Creek goes into a sewer opening at the east end of Gunnison Gap. The structure is commonly referred to as King Kong's Cage. Gunnison Gap looked like this from the air in the 1930s. This parking lot was underwater during the 2010 flash flood. Now we will drive into the downtown area. We have stopped under the Washington Street overpass. Looking behind us, we again see Patterson Hollow. A better view from above. An interesting view from long ago. An old aerial view of Patterson Hollow. Driving on. We have stopped near Washington and Hawkeye Streets. Looking toward North Hill, we see an area that was at one time a deep ravine. A short stream flowed through this ravine, joining the main flow at Hawkeye Street. In 1874, the ravine cut across Columbia Street between Central Avenue and North 8th Street. It is filled in today. Driving further into downtown. We have just turned the corner onto Jefferson Street and are headed toward the river. Looking behind us, we see Hawkeye Street. In the 1870s, the city of Burlington began building underground sewers to transport both sewage and stormwater. This 1880s photograph shows the construction of the Hawkeye Creek sewer at Jefferson and Hawkeye Streets, looking upstream. Today, all of Hawkeye Creek flows underground in the downtown area. In 1995, the city of Burlington filmed portions of the sewer system in preparation for separating the storm waters from sewage. Charles Mason, the first Supreme Court Justice for the state of Iowa and an early Burlington settler, told the story of a circus parade crossing a wooden bridge over Hawkeye Creek on Jefferson Street. The bridge collapsed under the weight of a caged hippopotamus. Efforts were made to use elephants to remove it, but to no avail. Eventually, the hippopotamus was released from its cage and it waddled out of Hawkeye Creek. A wall of water came crashing down Jefferson Street during the 2010 flash flood. Many businesses were seriously damaged. A stream called South Branch joined the Hawkeye Creek near North 7th and Valley Streets. It is said that Charles Perkins bought up much of the land in the South Branch Ravine to keep the Santa Fe Railroad from obtaining a route into Burlington. South Branch started at what is now Perkins Park. West Avenue runs over an earthen bridge at the northern edge of Perkins Park. On the other side, South Branch freely flows through an undeveloped area between West Avenue and Grove Street. The stream runs underground in a storm sewer down Higbee Street. The ravine passes to the right as Higbee takes a turn to become Marshall Street. It then passes through an undeveloped area and emerges near the intersection of Division and Central. In 1874, the South Branch Ravine cut across both Division Street and Central Avenue, then called Boundary Street. The intersection was eventually filled in. South Branch Creek then flowed into what was once called Stony Lonesome Hollow, the current location of Bracewell Stadium. Bracewell Stadium was built in 1920 and has been improved a number of times since. This picture was probably taken from the steeple of St. John's Catholic Church. Bracewell Stadium's location and the old public high school are on the left. Market Street was cut in two by the ravine. Market Street is now filled in. A 1930s aerial view of the South Branch Ravine. Now let's drive down Valley Street for a few blocks. We have stopped under the 6th Street Bridge. In 1889, the bridge looked like this. The sewers were built to prevent flooding. However, This picture, taken in 1922, shows that it did not always do its job. We have stopped at Valley Street and 5th Street to take a look at the sewer in this area. Let's go underground again. Hawkeye Creek's original path took it down the alley between 4th and 5th Streets, where it turned and followed the railroad tracks to the river. We can't drive that way, but we will go around and catch up. After we turned the corner onto North 4th Street, we can see where the street and railroad tracks meet. In 1860, they did not cross. 4th Street was 18 feet below the tracks. It is filled in and leveled now. Before we turn onto Market, we will go back in time to look at a train crossing the 4th Street trestle. Also in this area, a small stream ran down from South Hill, cutting the large hill that jumps up at South 4th and Division. St. Francis Hospital used to set on top of this hill. The stream flowed from a spring that came to the surface near South 5th and Elm Streets, flowed down Elm Street, and then angled toward downtown around South 4th Street. It joined Hawkeye Creek in an area called Happy Hollow. The hollow was a couple of blocks long and was located between Division and the railroad tracks. This is all that is left of Happy Hollow. If we look to our right from 3rd and Market, we get a good look at Happy Hollow in the early 1860s. Notice the bridge over Hawkeye Creek on South 3rd Street near the 3-story building. Notice the railroad engine between the buildings. In 1857, another flash flood forced a family living in Happy Hollow to seek safety on the roof of their home. Now on to the river. But first we have to stop at Main Street. To our right is the depot area. In early days, Market Hall was located in this area. Farmers brought their goods here and sold them to merchants and individuals. This is how Market Street got its name. In fact, Hawkeye Creek was known to the first settlers as Market Creek. There was a ferry boat called the Jerry that traversed Hawkeye Creek, possibly as far as Jefferson and Hawkeye Streets. It was anchored in this vicinity for repairs, took on water, and sunk. The owner just left it. Local lore has it that it still rests below Market Street. The railroad constructed a levee to raise its tracks above the river and to level the grade. This was before the railroad bridge was built in 1868. You can see Hawkeye Creek flowing around the levee. The building in the background was the railroad freight house. The whole area was eventually filled in and leveled. This view shows the original railroad depot. Notice the sidewalk bridge over Hawkeye Creek. We end our trip south of the auditorium. Burlington was an ideal port for riverboats. The riverfront sloped into the Mississippi. Before the flood control levees were built north and south of Burlington at the beginning of the 1900s, the river did not flood into downtown. The bottomlands above and below Burlington, on both sides of the river, flooded each spring, absorbing the extra water. Here you can see where Hawkeye Creek used to flow into the river. A retaining wall was built in 1932 to level the riverfront. At one time, the main body of Hawkeye Creek flowed into the river just south of the auditorium. Now all branches move through here. There is no light at the end of the tunnel, just darkness. The other side of that dark spot is this gate. It is here that Hawkeye Creek joins the Mississippi River on its long journey to the Gulf of Mexico.